Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me for this question and answer based podcast. So if you would like your question answered on a future episode, you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can click on the submit a question link and you can write said question and I will see it, read it, consider it, and likely put it up on a future episode as I am doing today. Now, you can go over and cut the line of the emailed ones, and you can send me an audio question, and you can go, the best way to do this, go over to Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over there. Send me a message over there. Send me a DM, send me a direct message, and click on the little microphone button at the bottom there. And record your question, and then I'll get it. It'll be fast. I'll put it up. You can record it yourself, put it on your phone, email it to me, questions at Fearcast Podcast, or send me the shared Google Drive, whatever you want. So I'm trying to find, I'm sure, I have not done a deep dive on this, but I'm sure there's an app out there, a plugin or something that I can put on the main page of fearcastpodcast.com. And you could press a little button and you could just simply record your voice there and it would email it to me. That would be my ideal. Now, here's the problem. I have not done a deep dive into that. And I'm going to say I suck at it. I mean, I built the website, I put it all together, all that stuff, but there's still some stuff that I just kind of suck at and it's just kind of where it's at right now. But if you, the listener, have knowledge of this and know what type of thing I could do, email me, send me a DM, something, do something, let me know, and I will put that up on the podcast. I'm just trying to ultimately find the easiest possible way to send me your question, your audio question, and we'll put it up. So that is my fantasy. If y'all can help me with that, that would be great. Now, of course, Instagram exists, of course. There are some apps where you can record your voice and just send it over directly, but, it's just a lot of steps and things. So anyways, these are the options. This is the stuff that's on my mind. Anyways, I hope y'all are doing well. Hope everybody is kind of settling into the year. There's a decent amount of chaos happening, at least here in the States. Some people like the chaos. Some of the rest of us don't like the chaos. And before I get into the question today, I got a question today from someone who's calling themselves Potato Chip Fiend. So I love this name. This is fantastic. This is not why I chose the question, but I'm going with it anyways. And by the way, I'll say this to anybody who has a question about putting up your question to the question and answer based podcast, just know there's anonymity. You can pick pretty much whatever name you want. Now, if it's wildly not safe for work, I'm going to change it. But if it's stuff like this, Potato Chip Fiend, guess what? Potato Chip Fiend it shall be, and it's going up. So you can put it up there. No one's going to know who Potato Chip Fiend is, except for Potato Chip Fiend. And me. I do have to ask for your real name, your real email address, but you know what? I'm never going to tell. I'm never going to release that information. It never goes anywhere. It never goes anywhere. So send me that. Anyways, hopefully that helps to make it a little easier. So I just wanted to mention this at the very top of this. So sometimes I don't follow my own advice, my own guidance. So sometimes I get carried away with anxiety and it's not fun. And my brain goes a mile a minute and my brain goes to catastrophic thinking and it goes to tunnel vision. It's all or nothing. It's not good. I know it's not healthy. And yet sometimes all of us get stuck in that, myself included. The latest thing was some scuttlebutt on the internet about Donald Trump, the person in the office of the presidency, I should say. Y'all have heard of him, right? You've heard of him. Anyways, so talk about him dismantling, getting rid of, selling off, whatever, public land, meaning national parks, and or getting rid of them, something like that. This of all things, this got me. Now, of course, he has talked about a lot of crazy nonsense, and there's a lot of crazy nonsense to be upset about. And this one in particular grabbed my attention because I really I value the national parks. I think it's an amazing, wonderful thing that America has done. America has a lot of beautiful land and nature that we need to preserve, and we need to admire and appreciate and preserve in the best possible way. So the idea of destroying this just got me riled up. And we brought it up to the staff, or someone in the staff brought it up at Cal OCD, and everybody else got upset. And the reality is this: I would go on in the internet and I'd see posts on Reddit about people talking about this, and I heard a podcast or two about people talking about this, and it's just okay, it got me upset. All right, here's what I need to remember, and this is a reminder for myself as much as it is for everyone else out there whose anxiety is going to get triggered and is going to get activated by maybe stuff you see on the internet or stuff that you see in the news. So, number one, for those of us who can get riled up easily, it's important to consider putting limitations or boundaries around our media consumption. So what that can look like is limiting the amount of time you spend on news websites. So this is going to be broad, not just for National Park, not just for Donald Trump, but stuff if you are activated by it. We can consider limiting our media intake, the news, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram for that matter, YouTube, or just TV news. Did you know that they still put news on the television and they still produce newspapers? Anyways, if you are someone who does that, awesome. But it's important to remember that those things can produce stories, can then activate us. Now, of course, everything that we talk about on this podcast is about how do you manage and deal with the fact that sometimes we're going to get triggered. Now, of course, we are going to get triggered, and we also don't have to seek out the triggers unnecessarily. In the course of living life, we might encounter things, but we can also remember that to create a life or to create a world around us that is workable and livable and enjoyable, sometimes that requires minimizing the amount of things in our life that are going to be unhealthy, or I hate to use the term, quote, toxic, right? Stuff that it just gets in our craw, really activates us unnecessarily and is bothersome. So this isn't to say avoidance, but it's to say trying to find a workable thing for a time. And it may be for me for right now, and for some of you out there, right now is a time that we're going to limit. So it might be we're going to do 5 minutes or 10 minutes of reading the news a day instead of the 30 minutes or 5 hours that we might be doing. It might be that we curate our Reddit feeds and get rid of some subreddits that are going to be more activating than others, and bring in stuff that's going to be more life-giving and more enjoyable, right? Maybe instead of reading the news for 5 hours or putting on NPR or putting on the news or, God forbid, Fox News or anything like that, it's maybe we're going to put on just music. We're going to put on other podcasts that are intentionally edifying or intentionally encouraging, right? Now, again, don't hear this as suppression. Hear this as bringing in that which is life-giving, right? Life is going to give us plenty of things. So that's just one. The second is catching ourselves when we get caught up in black and white thinking, right? Stuff that we hear on the news, the clickbait world that we're in right now, it's easy to get sucked into it just simply by the ridiculous headlines of it. So remembering that if we get really activated, it's very possible that there are some cognitive distortions at play, and that may be black and white thinking, the all or nothing, the maybe labeling, it may be magnifying, maybe tunnel vision, all those distortions, right? Those may be at play. And we can challenge ourselves to look at those distortions and consider what's another way to consider this, maybe what's a balanced view of this. And lastly, I'll say we need to also wait and be patient before jumping to action or anger or fury or depression or dread. we need to remember that we don't know the future. Our anxiety and anger and dread is often, mostly, driven by our imagination, driven by that which could be. I'm infuriated by the idea of destroying the national parks. The national parks have not been destroyed. As of the recording of this podcast, they have not been destroyed. So, my anger, anxiety, fear, sadness, depression, dread, those are all based in my imagination. Those are all fictitious. And I need to remember that they're not happening, and I can take a sigh of relief to that and a calming breath and grounding myself in today. Now, I can say, if and when these things happen, I will take action. If and when these things happen, I will say something or do something. But until that happens, it hasn't happened. I can also choose in this to say I'm going to still support the national parks or support the group or the foundation or the whatever that is out there that is activated within you. What are some things that are reasonable and balanced that you can do, that you can sustainably do? And sustainably doesn't just mean like finances. It also means like, can you dedicate an hour to this a week? Can you dedicate 2 hours? Or is it like you can only dedicate like 10 minutes a day because you're just really busy, or you are in a life phase that requires a lot of attention, right? I mean, my kids are, getting older, I guess. One's going to be 4 next week. And it's, we're still in this weird phase of not being able to really do a lot outside of kid life. Now, I'm sure other people out there have a different pace of life, but, our life is like, we still got kids. I can't do all the things that I perhaps could have done when I was single or didn't have kids or, wasn't married or whatever it might be. So take into account the sustainability of the thing that you want to do. Can you do it? Can you do that thing? Can you support your cause? And do it while also completing the tasks required at your job, so you can continue to do that successfully. Continue to do that to the standards that you appreciate, that your boss appreciates, or that your clients appreciate. And can you do it so that you don't burn yourself out and go crazy in the process? So, anyways. These are just some thoughts that I've had and been bouncing around my head for a while, but there are some things that we can do, and I hope everybody out there is finding a workable fashion to be able to be themselves, to be able to live their life, and to be able to live their life in reality, not in the feared imagination. All right, so that's what I'll say at the top, and now let's jump into Potato Chip Fiend's question. So it is a text question, so I shall read it now. So he goes on to say, now let me just double check. I don't necessarily know if this is a he, but I'm going to treat it as if. All right, here we go. He says, "Hey, Kevin, been listening to your podcast, and I love it. Thanks, Potato. Thought I might submit this thinker for you." They go on to say, "As a kid, I fantasized a lot over pictures of my elementary school crushes. Naturally, as I and they became older, I fantasized over those images." They say parenthetically, "I was fairly concerned with being a pedophile / hebephile even at that age." End parenthetical. Go on to say, "Or I moved on to my teachers. I was a young teenage boy." Oh, there we go. Boy. See, I knew it was a bit. All right. I was a young teenage boy in an all-boys school, so not many choices there. Understandable. All right. They go on to say, "Obviously, when I was in college, I had fully moved on from those elementary school crushes. But ever since, there's been a series of nagging doubts that OCD has clung onto. What if I'm still attracted to those school photos of my elementary school crushes? What if I'm an ephebophile, or a pedophile? What if my brain got stuck in its sexual development? They're obviously very distressing thoughts, and I've done my best not to do any resting compulsions. Although, as you can see, it's quite difficult not to ruminate. I've tried my best to move on by saying, yeah, that would be awful, or maybe I am, maybe I'm not, oh well, or I've only ever fantasized about people my age. I say this last one my brain likes to pick on because I often have vivid dreams about my crushes as children. But I've always chalked that up to just weird brain stuff or emotional trauma or something. Dreams don't mean anything. Anyways, they go on to say, so my question is, how would you deal with this situation? How can I accept uncertainty? What should I say to myself when OCD decides to bring this up? Potato chip. Thank you so much for this. This is a great question. This is one of those awesome questions that I would say awesome. This is tongue in cheek, I suppose. It's an awesome question because this is what I love about working within OCD and anxiety is that there is always something new. That I've never been bored in working with this population. OCD is great because there's always this question that will come up. You go, well, haven't thought about that before or haven't considered that before. So here we go. But you know what? The reality is anxiety and OCD is only limited by your human imagination. And you know what? We can all imagine something like this. And so therefore, someone's brain is going to get attached to it. So I'll say this. So your question made me think about a joke that I'd heard or seen or whatever on various platforms. So I'm just going to play the relevant clip here. This is from a guy named Gianmarco Soresi. Yeah, let's go with that. So I'm going to play it here. I think it's kind of funny. It might be activating to some people, but that's kind of what we do.
The term pedophile refers to people who are attracted to those that are prepubescent. Then there's something called a hebophile. That's people who are attracted to those in the early stages of puberty, like 11, 12, 13, 14. And then there's something called an ephebophile. That's people who are attracted to those in the later stages of puberty, like 15, 16, 17, 18. But I think the reason we don't make those distinctions is because it's very hard to explain the difference without sounding like a pedophile.
All right, so to move on, I'll also say this at this point. So with a lot of the questions that I get, if there's something in it that feels maybe outside of what I've typically dealt with, or seems like there's something to it that maybe somebody else has kind of already answered before, there's an article relevant to it, I try to Google that just so I'm not having to reinvent the wheel, or perhaps there is a name for something or a treatment for something that I'm just simply not aware of. And, sometimes that happens. And, for every therapist out there, we're going to kind of, look into things and see if there is something out there, something out there. Here's the thing. It's hard to Google this without it sounding exceptionally odd or without producing some very unhelpful results. So Googling things like I'm attracted to images of elementary school crushes, that can produce weird results. I can't stop thinking about whether or not I'm a pedophile, can produce some weird results. So anyways, I didn't Google this. Now, someone out there may know something about this in particularly about like thoughts or attractions or and how all that works. But if you do, let me know. But what I'm going to go with is kind of treating this or treating your question kind of like I'm going to treat it as if, in the world of OCD and anxiety disorders. Okay, so I'm going to grant you that in this, that we're going to treat it as if it is this. Now, this doesn't include, if there are any questions, and of course, if you were in my office, we'd be asking questions like, hey, how attracted are you by these mental images, by these dreams? Is there part of you that likes them, part of you that doesn't like them? And we'd be, piecing that out. Now, it doesn't mean all or nothing, because we also need to remember, and we're going to talk more about this in just a moment. I'm not saying you're never attracted to. I'm not saying you're always attracted to it. We're going to talk about parts of it and then which parts and how are you attracted, to what degrees they're discussed. I'm going to assume in the way that you've written this that there is disgust or frustration or ego dystonicness to it, meaning it doesn't reflect who it is that you are, which is why you have a, quote, problem with it, why you are upset with it, which is why you're emailing me about it. So these are all things that I'm going to assume. Now, you also mentioned emotional trauma. which you then didn't expand on. So I don't know if saying emotional trauma is just you kind of going like, emotional trauma, because we all have it, because, all that, TikTok pop psychology sort of stuff. Now, if there is some genuine emotional trauma here, that may change the way that I answer this question. You didn't expand on it, so I'm not. You also said it as like you said it in the phrase. Is it just weird brain stuff / emotional trauma or something? Dreams don't mean anything. I'm going to treat it as if it's nothing, and it's hyperbolic in the language that you're using. Now, if I'm wrong, let me know or whatever, or continue to see your therapist. Also continue to see your therapist. To that end, I hope you are working with a therapist. All right, that's that. All right, so to get into it. So it kind of sounded like you have 3 different questions in there, but they were all kind of similar, but certainly for other people out there, they could all be very, very different. One could be more pressing than the other. So there are questions like, well, what if I'm still attracted to the school photos, right? So that could be an obsession in and of itself. So what if I'm a pedophile or an ephebophile? That's some, classic POCD questions. And then, what if my brain got stuck in its sexual development? And, all of those questions, I would love to pull apart with you, but it raises, what's the core fear? What is bringing you back to this obsession, and why do you justify? In what way do you justify the rumination or the active obsessional compulsive stuff that you are doing? Right. And, it could be a lot of things, right? Is it just straight up POCD stuff? What if I'm a pedophile? Terrifying. I don't want it. No one wants it. You don't want it. Nobody wants it. All right. Got it. Is it that? And it's the fear of that and getting caught in jail and rejection and criticism and all that stuff. Or like the feeling that maybe you're the worst forever, et cetera. Is it simply being wrong about actually being a pedophile? Like just that idea of being wrong, not knowing yourself fully. I don't know. Is it being stuck, not having a clear answer for why you have these thoughts? Kind of in like a need to know sort of component, right? So I need, like, for some people in this situation, it might be like they're stuck on this idea of trying to, or this urge to figure out why this thought is there. What does it mean about me? And this, like, it's just the fact that you don't have the clear, rock solid, bulletproof answer that can be nagging and pulling you back in. It might be that. Is it the fact that you're having these distressing dreams and like and just simply feeling unresolved about this forever, like the worry that you're going to be stuck with this forever. Now, some of this is going to be important in trying to figure out how to do exposures to it. It could kind of twist things slightly, right? If it was the worry that you're going to be having these distressing dreams forever. Now, first off, we don't know if you're going to have these distressing dreams forever, but we do know that you're having them, now. And what if they're there forever? So a script might look like you having these, waking up from these dreams, when you have your own kids and when you're, when you're celebrating your, 20th wedding anniversary. And, as you're on your deathbed dying, the last thing you think about is that, that girl from second grade, and you croak, right? I don't know. So, but you can see how these stories will change. If it's that idea of not knowing yourself, maybe a script could look like, things about you changing, and you used to like pizza, and all of a sudden you hate pizza, and then you kind of switch over, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna be fully goth now, and that's how I dress. Or if you are currently goth, you're like, I'm gonna be a preppy now. Or I think those are opposites. Anyways, I went to high school in the 2000s, so in the early 2000s / late 1900s. So those were relevant things at the time. I'm old now. All right, moving on. So one of the things you can do with this, and one of the things that any therapist would do is to go into one of two things, if not both. So since I'm a CBT therapist, I'm obviously going to get into cognitive restructuring, and that's the process of looking at the thoughts and the fears that you're having and trying to pull them apart and trying to think about We're trying to point out how are they distorted and twisted and blown out of proportion? And what's a more balanced way to view this about yourself? So we are going to challenge, we're all going to question, how do you see your attractions now, right? Are the vast majority of attractions you've had, since elementary school, same age or appropriate age directed or pointed towards someone who's of the same age or similar age or of legal age or something to that effect, right? That's going to have a significant impact on where we go with this, right? If you're like, no, actually, I seem to always be attracted to 15-year-olds. I don't know what that's about. Going to be a different conversation, right? But if you're saying like, you know what, for the vast majority of my life, I've been attracted to people who are kind of within my same age, plus or minus a couple of years, right? So that's going to help to challenge that narrative that says you are always and are going to be attracted to children, right? Which is sometimes what the obsession is, and it sounds like from you, it's that's kind of what that story is. So there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that and to point out what you believe to be true about yourself, historically speaking. You can also acknowledge, it sounds like this is the case. You can also acknowledge that you have OCD if you have been diagnosed with this before. For a lot of folks that I work with, we also acknowledge, hey, we have OCD. So there's this pattern of unwanted intrusive thoughts that produces anxiety that seemingly requires a compulsive behavior or a thought or an avoidance to try to get a sense of safety, security in order to move on with life, right? Knowing that there is this pattern, well, this thought fits into that pattern. So perhaps this is an intrusive thought that ultimately, historically, like all the other ones, means nothing, right? So you can give yourself permission in that to let it go. Now, there's a lot of other ways to do cognitive restructuring. Another one to consider from an ICBT perspective is the stuff that is found in Module 2, which I really enjoy. And what that is, it's looking at what is OCD's logic, right? To let OCD speak, to let the obsession go wild and say, like, how is it really convincing? How is it gathering all the argument together to present it to you in a way that seems rational and reasonable enough for you to do your compulsions, right? It's its argument. So it is its argument, right? And it's based in 5 things. I'm not going to go through all of them in depth. I'll let y'all go and do that on your own. But what that looks like is this. So the 5 points are abstract facts and ideas, general rules, hearsay, personal experiences, and just it's possible, right? So from one, we can already say, like from personal experiences, you do acknowledge a history, an experience of kind of being attracted to these people, right? There was a time that, as you would probably say, you were similar aged, it was age appropriate, and you noticed this genuine attraction to them. Maybe I'm reading into it perhaps, but that's kind of what it sounds like. And that's the story that was happening, right? I went back and reread it. So you were fantasizing about over pictures of your elementary school crushes, and then you fantasized about those images, right? And I'm imagining the stories like imagining pictures that you had at like your birthday party or from your yearbook or whatever it might be, and fantasizing, and those images are coming up, or those are the images that you remember. And those are the things that get stuck in your mind. Again, same age sort of thing. All right. So there was a history of that, right? Now the OCD, the story can also relate to maybe hearsay, right? You may have heard stories on the news or read stuff elsewhere on the interwebs about how, people were noticed that they were attracted to children or attracted to, a certain age group at one point, and as they grew up, their attraction didn't move on from that age group, and now they're a full-blown pedophile or something to that effect. It might be, these general rules. It's not great to be a pedophile. I feel like that's a solid rule that we all kind of know, or that you're not supposed to have you're not supposed to have fantasies about people from, like there's a certain age range that's like appropriate, and beyond that, it's like all of a sudden bad. So like you can imagine like, kissing your crush in high school because you were like 16, 17, 18. But like if you're, 7, 8, 9, like, oh no, it's bad, right? So there can be that, right? Abstract facts and ideas, or, just simply it's possible, right? It's possible that you could be stuck in your sexual development, and it's possible that you are still attracted to them. So your anxiety and OCD is going to take all that and round it up, right? It doesn't say you're always attracted to children and that's why you're a pedophile, right? It doesn't say that. It says, hey, here's all this roundabout information. Here's all this like slightly like disconnected or irrelevant or, not quite fitting, but, we're just going to kind of judge it a little bit or just add a feeling to it or twist a memory of it just ever so slightly. And all of a sudden, all those pieces fit together into this narrative that says you're this monster or whatever it might be. So all of these are just ways that you can start to challenge the legitimacy of the thought and kind of gain a little bit of understanding about how this story may be playing out. Now, the best that I could come up with, and if you were in my office, we'd be talking a little bit about this and to what degree this plays a role into it. Now, this might be reassurance seeking, reassurance giving, but I'm going to do it anyways. So we've talked about arousal non-concordance on this podcast before. If this is your first podcast, man, you jumped into a fun one. But if this is your first one, look up arousal non-concordance. It's kind of this idea that sometimes arousal is not an all or nothing thing. Okay? So sometimes we can be mentally and emotionally aroused, and sometimes we can be physically aroused. And sometimes we are one or the other. Sometimes there is, an absolute overlap and you are ready to go and your body and your mind and your spirit and your emotions and your soul are into it. And there are other times when you're like, emotionally, you're not really there, but your body is aroused, right? Fellas, we've talked about this before. Morning wood is that. Your body's kind of ready to go, but your mind, you're like, I get a coffee and get to work, right? You're not thinking sexy time thoughts, but your body kind of is, and it can go the other way around, right? Sometimes mentally you're into it, but your body's just not cooperating. Men and women can all consider this and all have had these experiences, right? So, point of my bringing this up is that sometimes we have thoughts and experiences that are accelerants or accelerators to our attraction and kind of move us towards that. And there are some thoughts that are kind of the brakes and kind of stop us from moving forward, right? They're like, that's not going to work for me. Now, what I'm hearing in this is actually arousal non-concordance, or more of that than anything else, short of having a longer conversation with you, Potato. But there's kind of this idea of like, I'm wondering if the attraction and arousal is more to the memory of how that person made you feel at that time, not the attraction to the person as they were at that time from your current vantage point. Does that make sense? Meaning, having crushes on somebody, your first couple of crushes when you're a kid, are a big deal. You're like a whole new room has opened up in your mind, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is here? This is oh my gosh, there's these feels and that feels good, and what's happened? Like, and this confusion, like, why do I feel this way? Why is that moving? I don't know and there's all this stuff is happening. And it's great, it's awful, it's confusing, and it's super fun. And it makes a huge impact on your memory and what it means to be you. So, I'm wondering if, as you're going on in life, you're kind of remembering that. And it's that excitement that had initially had you pulled back into those memories, but not that person as they were when they were 7, 8, 9, or whatever age they were. But when you were 7, 8, 9, they were 7, 8, 9, and there was that excitement, right? But your brain has a tough time pulling that apart, because your experience with them was at that age. So you kind of mentally time travel back to that age, but you don't physically time travel back to that age too. So you're stuck in this place. This thought is super fun and arousing. Oh, but not to that image. But also to that image. If I was 7, 8, 9 again, that was kind of fun. But not now, right? So there's this back and forth and this tug of war that may be happening with you emotionally that may be contributing to this. And OCD loves that. So it's going to grab onto that and say, this uncertainty, this unsettledness, this unmoored, untethered thing that you're in, you need to figure this out. You need to get to the bottom of that. Or else, right? So the or else stuff, man, it'll just get you. So all that may be happening, and now you're thinking about it a lot. And what we know about particularly our dreams is what we think about a lot during the day will often show up in our dreams. Okay? And sometimes, conflicts or struggles or stressors that we're having in our regular life, they'll show up in our dreams as stresses and struggles, or they show up in like very twisted, weird ways. Especially with like, here's a thing that I'm thinking about a lot and don't think about this and I hate this and I'm trying to get this out of my head. And your brain goes, you mean this thing? And you go to bed and you have this dream and it's exactly the worst thing that you can imagine. I've had those dreams. You've had those dreams. I'm sure other people have had those dreams too. Anyhow. I'm wondering if that's what's more going on. All right. So within all of that, I think there's some great stuff that you're doing. You said you're intentionally not ruminating. Fantastic. Obviously easier said than done. You said you're intentionally practicing non-engagement responses, right? That's the stuff where you're saying like, yes, that would be awful, right? We can say, yep, that would be awful. You could say, ugh, that makes me feel uncomfortable. We're acknowledging the thought, but we're not really getting into it, right? It's just like it's a hey, cool story, bro. It's acknowledging that it's happening, but it's not really debating it or engaging. I also like the maybe not. That's a classic when it comes to OCD and anxiety stuff. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I'm not really going to get into it, right? But then you said your brain's getting stuck on that, like, only attraction to people my age, right? Or that you've only been attracted to, right? And we've talked about that, right? The vivid dreams, I think, yes, we can and we should chalk that up to just kind of weird brain stuff because it's historically inconsistent with who it is that you are. Now, you remember the aforementioned trauma bit? That reference that too. All right. So what can you do about this? So I think in this, I've talked a little bit about some exposure scripts you can certainly do. And I also think acceptance is just another powerful thing that you should be doing with this too. At the end of the day, to spend no more time debating, questioning this. Perhaps you've heard me talk about, trust your compulsive conclusion, right? Meaning, when you do compulsions, you're fighting tooth and nail for some outcome, for an answer, for something. And you're trying to prove that to be true. And you do that over and over and over again, right? You're saying, this is who I am, right? I love the idea from ICBT where it talks about the obsessive doubt. It's calling into question something you believe to be true about you. Obviously, this is not the case for everybody necessarily in how you experience your obsessions, but the idea that it's questioning something you believe to be true about you. And this is calling into question something that you believe to be true about you. You believe that you are not a pedophile, and yet your brain goes, hey, you might be. And you're going, nope, and you fight to prove that you're not. What if that was right? What if your compulsive conclusion was right, that you weren't? Everything that you're fighting for in this, what if that was accurate, right? We also have that discussion when we do your alternative thought records, when we talk about building, a more rational, grounded view of who you are and what these thoughts mean for you and about you. We kind of say, all right, all the stuff that we just talked about and challenging those distorted thoughts, what if all that were true? If all that were true, would compulsions be necessary? Would you still engage with those if you knew that stuff were to be true? 20 times out of 20, people go, nah, dude, I wouldn't do that. They're like, I would engage with it, right? But that doubt seeps in, right? And I think that's what may be happening here. So what we can do with this is when the thoughts arise, we can acknowledge the thought. Yeah, it's there. I see it. It's there. And then you can acknowledge the way that it made you feel at that time, right? Now, this is going to be a weird approach. And if you were in my office, we'd be talking about this. But there's an acceptance piece to this, which is what I'm trying to get at here. Now, remember that parts stuff that I talked about earlier? This is where this comes in. There are parts of that memory that may be great. There are parts to that experience in your life that was meaningful and foundational, perhaps. What if you were to acknowledge those? What if you were to say, yeah, man, that person was awesome. Man, that person was super cute. Man, that person was fun. Man, we got along great. Right? What if you were to say, yeah, I love this part of this memory. I loved who this person was. And I love that I have this memory and I had the experience with this person. Right? Man, remember when we played this game? Remember when we, were in class and I made that fart sound and they just giggled and giggled, right? I don't know what y'all did. Point is that like you can acknowledge those stories, but that's all that needs to be done with it. And then we leave it alone. The acceptance is to the thought and to that part of it that you like. Now, this will activate your anxiety because this is the last thing OCD wants to hear. It wants to hear, nope, not me. Put it down, right? But you're not going to do that because you've already done it. Instead, you're going to let that feeling be there and it's going to feel uncomfortable because, man, you're really poking the bear with it too. But you don't need to give into it. I'd in fact encourage you in that. There's going to be no discussion with it, no argument against it. You're then going to speak to the feeling, right? Ooh, this feels bad. I feel uncomfortable right now. I get this tightness in my chest and my hair is on fire and my stomach is going to explode out of my body and my feet feel like they're just shooting lasers, right? I don't know what y'all feel, but it's like your body feels awful or my head is in a vice and my brain is swirling and I've got all these mental images. And you know what? Yeah, you do. You do. Period, hard stop, no more discussion about it. You do. And you know what, Potato? You got other stuff to do with your day. You got work to go to. You got friends to hang out with. You got a spouse to hang out with. You got kids to deal with. You got stuff. That's the stuff to deal with. That's the stuff that's in front of you. But you can acknowledge then, here's that thought. Yeah, man, that was super fun. Let's go with that memory into whatever you're doing, right? Trust yourself. Trust who it is that you are and who it is that you say you are, and act as if that person is the real you. Because I bet it is. So that is an approach, and that's one thing that you can do with it. Now, this is easier said than done. Everything that I talk about on this podcast is easier said than done, but it's a different way to consider it, that it's accepting the part of you that is the part of you that you liked, right? They were crushes for a reason. Right? It's kind of like we would even have this conversation like once you as a therapist, you also process like people's breaking up with their partner, right? And sometimes they break up with their partner because, I don't know, let's go with like they cheated on you or something crazy, right? They cheated on you. But that person may still be having positive memories about that person or going like, they weren't that bad. Like maybe we should get back together. Maybe I was too hasty with breaking up. We've got to work it out. And then get like all mad at themselves for thinking that they could get back together and they cheated. It's like, well, you were with them for a reason, right? There was something about them that you enjoyed, that you liked, that you were attracted to, that was fun. There was a spark. There was something that clicked between you two. Right? That's fun. That's enjoyable. That's desirable, right? That's the stuff that we dream about and fantasize about. So it's these parts, right? And then you go like, oh, but they were, a cheating awful person, or they kept stealing. They just kept stealing all the time. I'm not here for that, right? Or it's like, I'm of this faith and they're, I don't know, an aggressive atheist, right? But you both like Dave Matthews Band and you guys like going to concerts together. Like, I don't know. But there's like this, there's a reason that you broke up, but there's a reason you got together. There's a reason that you were attracted to that person and you had that crush on that person. Acknowledge it, own it, live it, and move on with your life. No need to jump into it. Let that part go. All right, Potato, I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much for this question. This has been a really fun one to answer. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed it like that. I enjoyed sitting down at my computer going like, I'm going to Google this. And then went, I'm not going to get any answer that's going to be helpful, even a little bit, and I just let it go. So I hope this is helpful for you, Potato. I hope it's helpful for somebody out there. As always, y'all, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously.